Hello all and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another amazing Florida 10. Today I'll be looking at interesting historic sites in the Sunshine State, but there's a bit of a twist. These buildings, many of which are bona fide tourist locations, run in a line through Central Florida near a highway that has taken millions of vacationers to attractions such as Cypress Gardens, Gatorland, the Big Tree, and Blue Spring. Known simply as 1792, the odd thing is that it's often misunderstood by tourists and locals alike. So let's take a look at this unusual highway and 10 historic sites in 10 cities along the way. Enjoy! 1792 runs for about 90 miles or 145 kilometers from central Polk County to Volusia County, not too far from the Daytona International Speedway. However, the question is, should this road be here at all? The first thing to realize is that 1792 is an unusual number designation, especially for a federal highway, and the official name can clear up much of the misunderstanding. 1792 is actually U.S. Route 17 and U.S. Route 92. It's two separate federal highways which run together through 5 Florida counties. Now, having a road designated as 2 federal highways isn't unusual. 1792 itself joins up with 2 other federal highways in Osceola County. In fact, there's one intersection where all 4 roads connect, but we'll look at that in a moment. Still, even though it's common for U.S. routes to join up, 1792 is an unusual case. The federal highways that are even-numbered go east-west, while odd-numbered ones run north-south. The fact that 17 and 92 stay joined together for 90 miles is remarkable. The run starts in Lake Alfred, both quite a bit south and west of its end into land, so I suppose the highways are partly sticking to their nomenclature. In any case, it might be the longest concurrent run of federal highways in the country. As I mentioned before, 1792 has been a major tourist route, though today it's largely replaced by Interstate 4, which runs along the same corridor, usually only a few miles away from the older highway. It's pretty clear that the U.S. government felt the route was important enough to place an interstate there. So on our trip today, we'll start in Haines City near the southwestern end of 1792 and head to DeLand. We'll take a quick look at 10 historic sites, many of which have tourism connections. In Haines City, 1792 crosses U.S. Route 27, another of Florida's major tourist routes. I covered some aspects of 27 in this recent video on Florida's official state fruit, the orange. US 27 was an important part of the old Orange Blossom Trail. After crossing 27, 1792 goes through the old part of Haines City, and after passing Citrus Packing Houses, our first historic building is on the left. The Polk Hotel is a large 9-story building with Italian Renaissance Revival elements that was designed by Indiana architect Frederick Wallach. Completed in 1926, it's still the tallest building in the city. While it would seem obvious that the hotel was named for the county in which it was built, it actually wasn't. Polk County, which was established a month after Florida seceded from the U.S. in 1861, was named after former U.S. President James K. Polk, a pro-slavery politician much respected by secessionists throughout the South. The hotel, however, was named for its owner and builder Ralph S. Polk, a grapefruit grower who was originally from Indiana. Polk had the hotel built to house the workers of his large citrus processing company. Later in its life, it was converted to a rest home for the elderly and named the Palm Coast Hotel. Over the years, several other companies have used the structure, and in 1997 it became part of Landmark Baptist College, which continues to operate as of 2022. The building was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1994. Continuing north, past an old Maryland fried chicken that now also serves Chinese cuisine, we head to Davenport. 1792 also passes directly through the old part of this smaller community. Our second historic site shares the same block as Davenport City Hall. Both the City Hall and the Civic Center are located right off 1792 on Alapaha Avenue and are designed in the Mediterranean Revival style. Named after Davenport's former mayor from 1996 to 2012, The Peter Rust Civic Center was known for most of its life as Davenport's Community Center. It was built in 1935 and included a hip roof and a cross gable with gable extensions. Constructed during the Great Depression, it was built with help from the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, or FERA, one of President Franklin Roosevelt's relief agencies. The FERA would become the Works Progress Administration, or WPA, and the newly renamed agency would return to Davenport and add a recreation area with a pool as well as tennis and shuffleboard courts. The WPA was responsible for other projects in Florida, including Ravine Gardens in Palatka and Venetian Gardens in Leesburg. Davenport's recreation area was located between the community center and City Hall. The pool was painted with sea animals by artist Javier Palestino in 1997. It made it one of the few places where people could go swimming with killer whales. In 2016, the pool and courts were removed. When the community center was renamed in honor of the former mayor, the signage on the facade went from Chamber of Commerce and Community Center to History and Culture. And as of January 2021, the Davenport Historical Society has moved out of the City Hall and into the Civic Center. The building is part of the Davenport Historic District, which was established in 1997. From Davenport, we head towards Osceola County and its seat and largest city, Kissimmee. 1792 is John Young Parkway at this point. The road, which runs from Osceola County into Orange County, is named for John Young, one of America's most experienced astronauts. He flew on the first crewed Gemini mission, Gemini 3, in 1965, commanded Gemini 10 in 1966, flew as the command module pilot on Apollo 10 in 1969, commanded Apollo 16 and walked on the moon in 1972, and commanded the Space Shuttle program's first launch in 1981 and its ninth in 1983. In downtown Kissimmee, the highway makes a right from John Young onto Vine Street, but most people call it by its federal highway number, U.S. Route 192. So this is where the highway temporarily becomes 1792-192, as it heads due east. Kissimmee's historic site is a few blocks off the highway, near Lake Toho, and in the city's old town. Known as the Monument of States, it's the only site on the list that's not a building, and it's also one of the most unusual monuments in the country. The tower was created in 1943 with the support of the Kissimmee All-States Tourist Club. It features decorative stucco and concrete plates identifying the first 48 states, plus some local public figures and businesses. The monument was conceived and designed by Charles W. Bressler Pettis, a local doctor and president of the Tourist Club. Pettis's idea was to create a monument that would unite all the U.S. states after the Japanese raid on Pearl Harbor at the end of 1941. The 50-foot-tall structure was built by Pettis and his friend J.C. Fisher with an unusual pyramidal shape, one that's now reflected by some of the nearby street signs. The monument contains about 1,500 stones from all 50 states and 22 countries, most collected by Pettis and his wife. It's topped by a concrete globe and eagle with a 6-foot or 2-meter wingspan. Pettis sculpted the reportedly 562-pound or 255-kilogram eagle. Made out of reinforced concrete, the entire monument is estimated to weigh about 300 U.S. tons or 544 metric tons. The land was donated by Kissimmee, and the monument was built and paid for by local citizens. When Pettis died in 1954, the city allowed some of his ashes to be placed inside the monument. 1792-192 runs east for only about a mile, or 1.6 kilometers, until it makes a left onto Main Street to join yet another federal highway. This is U.S. Route 441, which is also part of the Old Orange Blossom Trail. It's at this intersection where U.S. Routes 17, 92, 192, and 441 all have an unusual convergence. The map here shows the direction each route goes. Coming from the west, both 1792 and 192 swap highways, each gaining 441. So this is where 1792-192 becomes 1792-441. Our route resumes a northerly direction, passing by both the world headquarters of Tupperware and Gatorland Zoo before entering the city of Orlando. Most of this stretch is named the Orange Blossom Trail in honor of the OBT Association that worked so hard to support and promote tourism throughout the center of the state. Near the end of its time on OBT, 1792 passes west of the historic heart of Orlando. The second county seat the highway passes through. The west side of downtown Orlando has also been the home of much of the city's vibrant and diverse black population. Today, because of all the tall buildings, it's easy to forget that Interstate 4 passes through downtown, not to the west of it. The traditional line between white and black Orlando was Division Avenue, but that color barrier essentially ran through the center of the city, as does I-4. On Orlando's west side sat the Wellsville Hotel and Casino, just 6 blocks to the east of 1792. The two-story building was built in 1929 by Dr. William Monroe Wells, one of Orlando's first black doctors. It quickly became an important hotel to accommodate blacks who visited Orlando, since none of the hotels on the east side of the city would welcome them. From the 1930s into the 40s, it hosted many famous individuals, including Count Basie, Floridian Ray Charles, Jackie Robinson, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and the Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. Early on, Wells also built a casino that stood to the west of the hotel. That was eventually torn down, and Wells's home was moved from a nearby lot in 2002. The Wellsville Hotel would fall into disrepair, especially after the period of desegregation, and closed around 1970. The building was acquired in 1997 by the Association to Preserve African American Society, History, and Tradition, which began a restoration in 1998. The building is now the Wellsville Museum of African American History and Culture. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2000, the same year that the museum opened. When 1792 reaches Colonial Drive, the highway makes a right turn, leaving US 441. About 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers later, it makes a right into Mills Avenue. The highway continues north on Mills, and as it enters the city of Winter Park, Mills becomes Orlando Avenue, a name the road will keep through the next 2 cities. Like Orlando, in Winter Park, 1792 passes on the west side of the city, and our next historic site is about 1.5 miles or 2.5 kilometers away. The site is our first church, which was yet another tourist destination. Located on the historic Rollins College campus, Knowles Memorial Chapel is a beautifully designed Episcopal church. The chapel was designed by Boston architect Ralph Adams Cram, who also designed the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City and the Princeton University Chapel. Built in 1932, the cost was paid for by Frances Knowles Warren in memory of her father Francis Bangs Knowles, who was one of the founders of Rollins College as well as Winter Park itself. The chapel was designed in the Spanish Mediterranean Revival style, like most of the later buildings on the college campus. The chapel's organ was built in 1932 by Ernest Skinner, one of the most important American organ builders, whose other organs grace places like the University of Florida, Harvard Divinity School, and the University of Virginia. The bell that rings from the bell tower is the original one that called students to classes in 1885. The Knowles Chapel was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1997, and later underwent a large masonry restoration that was paid for by a trust that was created by Francis Warren. The bell tower, which reaches 112 feet, can be seen from Lake Virginia. Next, 1792 enters Maitland, and only a few blocks to the west sits Maitland Art Center, yet another gem of Orlando area architecture. Built in 1937, the center was originally known as the Research Studio and was designed by Jules Andre Smith to be used as a home and a studio. Smith was a painter, architect, etcher, and author who focused on modern art. The eclectic building has a mixture of Maya and Aztec motifs in a Maya revival style, or sometimes known as fantasy architecture. Eventually, 27 buildings were constructed and evolved into a colony with both studios and apartments for several artists, including Milton Avery, Doris Lee, Ernest Roth, Arnold Blanche, Harold McIntosh, and Ralston Crawford. Following Smith's death in 1959, the center sat unused for a decade until the city of Maitland purchased it. In 1971, the Maitland Art Association leased the property and opened the Maitland Art Center. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2004. Maitland was named after nearby Lake Maitland, which was in turn named for Captain William Maitland, who fought and was killed in the Second Seminole War. Once 1792 passes out of Maitland, it enters Seminole County and continues on the same road until it gets to Sanford. Before that, however, we will stop in Longwood and visit the Bradley McIntyre House. It was built as a large winter cottage around 1885 and designed by noted Boston architect Nathaniel Bradley. Bradley and his family wintered in Altamont Springs, where the cottage was built. It was moved to Longwood in 1973 by the Central Florida Society for Historic Preservation to protect it from demolition. The house is an ornate example of the Queen Anne style with 15 rooms, asymmetrical tower placement, steep pitched roofs, decorative shingle patterns, and elaborate porch detailing. It's probably the best example of Victorian cottage-style architecture in Central Florida. It was bought by Maxwell McIntyre in 1904, who occupied it until 1946. The house was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1991. Continuing on, we reach Sanford, our third county seat and the home to the beautiful St. JamesAME Church. Once again, just a few blocks from the highway. St. James is an African Methodist Episcopal church, the first independent Protestant denomination founded by Black Americans. St. James was also the first black church organized in Sanford, dating from 1867, just 2 years after the end of the U.S. Civil War. The newly established congregation purchased this land in that same year. 2 wood-frame churches stood at this site, with the second one being replaced in 1913 by the Gothic Revival-style structure that continues to be the home of the congregation today. Designed by Prince W. Spears, a self-taught local architect who designed several other Sanford churches, the red brick building has several interesting features. These include beautiful stained glass windows framed by pointed Tudor Gothic arches, a pyramidal roof, and 2 towers. The church was featured in A Guide to Florida's Historic Architecture, published in 1989, and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1992. In Sanford, 1792 makes its final road changes, as can be seen on this map, going from French Avenue to First Street and then on to Monroe Road. From there, the highway uses the Bill Benedict Bridge to cross over the St. Johns River. Once across the St. Johns, it enters Volusia County. Continuing north, the highway eventually enters Orange City, home of Blue Springs State Park, one of the best places to see manatees in the wild in winter's colder days. In Orange City, we visit the Dixon Memorial Library and Park. The site was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1995. Located on 1792 and East Graves Avenue, the 5-acre property was donated by Dr. Francis Dickinson. There is both a masonry vernacular building with mission-style elements constructed in 1919 and a park created in 1916. Dr. Dickinson was originally from Chicago and moved to improve her health. In Orange City, she was a champion of women's rights, helped establish the Betsy Ross Airport, and was one of the area's largest benefactors. The Orange City Library was originally founded in 1879. 1792 runs on Volusia Avenue through Orange City, and when it gets to DeLand, it becomes Woodland Boulevard. DeLand is the 4th and final county seat the highway meets. As Woodland, 1792 is the main north-south street in DeLand and passes right by Stetson University. The university was established as DeLand Academy in 1883 and later named Stetson University in 1889 after John B. Stetson made a rather large donation. While there are numerous historic buildings on the campus, today I want to look at John Stetson's own home. And if you recognize the name, yes, John is the Stetson who invented the cowboy hat. Stetson's house is west of the highway and is a remarkable structure. Originally from Philadelphia, Stetson visited the land in 1886 and bought 300 acres. The architect George Pearson, who was also from Philadelphia, designed the house, and it was built in the same year. It's a large frame vernacular style, which means it was done outside any specific tradition, though it has aspects of Moorish, Tudor, and Queen Anne styles, with an asymmetrical facade, a dramatic curved corner, decorative rounded arch elements, and stained glass. Like the Bradley McIntyre house, this was the winter cottage for Stetson's family, who used it for 20 years. The house was not only designed by a Pennsylvanian, it was constructed out of wood and other materials mostly shipped from that northern state. A steamship from the Clyde line would have brought the material to Jacksonville, and then it'd be transferred to a smaller steam-powered riverboat for the trip on the St. John's to Sanford. There's also a schoolhouse behind the cottage, to be used by a tutor and the Stetsons' 3 children. Later, it was converted into a house for the gardener. The Stetsons also planted a large orange grove on the property. John Stetson died in 1906, and Elizabeth Stetson left for Philadelphia, never to return. In 1925, it was sold to the DeLand Holding Company, and most of the property was sold off and became the Stetson Estates. In 1978, the house was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Finally, the highway speeds north from DeLand and ends as abruptly as it began. US 17 heads to the northwest, and US 92 makes a right at the start of International Speedway Boulevard and heads to the northeast, passes by Daytona International Speedway on its way to its end at the world's most famous beach. There's many interesting stories about Florida's roads, and there's dozens of fascinating historic buildings, monuments, ancient sites, and even a boat or two in the state. If you have a favorite road, I'd be interested in knowing what it is. Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching another of my videos. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel to learn more about Florida's tourism history. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.